On this week's episode of the Macworld Podcast, it's all about your hot takes. You have thoughts about WWDC 2025, iPhones without ports, iPads without Apple Intelligence, and more. And we're going to talk about them on the show. It's going to be a good one, so stick around. Welcome to the Macworld Podcast. I'm Roman Loyola, here with Karen Haslam and David Price. This episode is all about social media hot takes. You have thoughts, and we're going to share and respond to what you wrote. All the comments mentioned in the show can be seen in the show notes for this episode on macworld.com. Before we get started, as usual, for this type of show, I apologize ahead of time because I always get the names wrong. But anyways, I'm trying. I really am. So let's get started. Apple announced the dates for its Worldwide Developers Conference. It starts on June 9th with a keynote, and the developer sessions will be held entirely online. It's kind of been that way since the end of the pandemic. There will be an in-person gathering for the keynote, which you can enter a lottery for on Apple's website if you're interested. But all the sessions, if you're a developer, will be online. The enthusiasm for this year's WWDC seems to be down a bit for a variety of reasons. For example, Joe Fabisovich I'm sorry, Joe, on Blue Sky posted, "I don't know if others feel this way, but this is the first year that I'm not excited for WWDC. It's not even about Apple products as much as it is being an Apple developer. What once felt like the best platform to work on is now riddled with bugs, annoyances, and missed opportunities to innovate." Matt Waller on Blue Sky said, "A lot of press lately about poor developer relations, and I've been making apps on Apple platforms for a long time. And still, I get excited thinking, what if they ... And then Brandon Higginbotham on Threads posted, "I wish I could say that I still get excited over WWDC events. I just don't anymore. I would love for this event to help me feel the magic of Apple devices again, but I'm not getting my hopes up." So whenever WWDC rolls around, I feel like there is this wave of people who are just kind of like, yay, WWDC. And then another wave of people of like, WWDC, here we go again. It's been kind of lame for the past few years, blah, 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 blah. This year, there's a new kind of added wrench. I didn't add any social media comments about this, but there's a hesitancy by a lot of developers outside the US of visiting Cupertino and going to the keynote because, I don't mean to talk about politics here, but we've got a lot of stuff going on in the US in terms of like coming in and out of the country. And it's scaring off a lot of people. So there's that issue as well. I actually saw a lot more comments about that than about, WWDC, okay, whatever.
I'm sure it used to be a really important networking event for developers. And now, obviously, some developers, some lucky few who do want to go to the US, maybe get a ticket to go to the keynote, get to network, because surely that's what it's about. But, everything, it's probably great that there are now all these sessions online so more people can go and don't have to travel to America to do it. But I think it will have lost its heart, by not being there in person. You can kind of watch a briefing on how to do something and learn about new software, but it's not the same as being there and meeting other people who are doing it too. So I'm sure that's a big part of it. And I think also if like developers were there with Apple could maybe do something to rectify the sort of disastrous year they've just had, and like the news that Siri and AI isn't really happening yet. And, they kind of need to get in front of the developers and manage some of that, like they did all those years ago with the creative pros they'd let down. They've let down developers this year. Because a lot of what they talked about at WWDC last year that applied to the developers hasn't happened yet. Could have been an opportunity to get in front of developers and rectify some of that. I don't think they will.
Jason Snell actually posted a column today. We're recording this actually on Thursday, March 27th. WWDC was just announced a couple days ago. And Jason Snell posted a column today about WWDC and what to expect. The main thrust of his column was like, this is kind of a conference where Apple needs to make good. Apple needs to kind of, I don't know if repent is the right word, but there is sort of a thing where Apple needs to, this year at WWDC, need to make up for some of the promises that they made last year that they didn't follow through on, the year that followed. And then they kind of have to do, a few other things, a few new things for this year as well. So it's kind of going to be, I don't know, it's not necessarily loaded, but loaded kind of in a bad way because they're including a lot of stuff that they didn't do.
Yeah, we've had that knock-on effect continuously. Whenever one thing is delayed, then that means, we keep hearing, well, this was going to be in iOS 19, now it's going to be in 19.4 or whatever. And so the issue they're going to have is managing the firefighting and the sort of reputational recovery, the repentance, and saying, we're really sorry we messed up with Siri and we're going to catch up. But they also have to keep it going and say, and here's this other new thing that we're going to promise for real this time. And, this time you can trust it. And it's going to be a really difficult balancing act.
I think that they could do what they did with Snow Leopard. If you go back far enough, there was Leopard, and then we had Snow Leopard. And Snow Leopard, rather than being, famously no new features, yeah? So why not do something like that? Why not say, we're going to be, I don't know, Redwood this year, for example, with macOS 10, like, since I'm on that. You talk about Sequoia, and then you've got another tree, and what we're going to do is we're going to look at the foundations and the roots, and we're going to make it all good. And like, rather than overloading with all the new features, do something like that and improve what they're building on. But, at the end of the day, they probably will have to put a gloss on it. And there are all these rumours about interface redesigns and stuff like that again. Every time they change something, we all scrabble around trying to put it back, don't we?
Yeah. I was trying to work out, before this started, I was looking at the features of iOS 18 and trying to think, what did I actually like from last year? And the answer is pretty much nothing. And one of the biggest things I noticed was iOS 18's Photos app has a different layout. As you said, it's confusing when you're not used to it. It doesn't seem really better. It's just different. And they do have to be really careful with that. You remember iOS 7, when they totally changed the visual look of it and everybody hated it. And they've kind of stuck roughly to that sort of non-skeuomorphic flat look ever since, like tweaked it a bit, but I'd be surprised. It's an interesting thing, actually. See, that thing about iOS 19 having a redesign, and there's, about the feud that's going on at the moment between, for me, it's a bit like when Mummy and Daddy are having an argument. It's like John Prosser and Mark Gurman are arguing. I love both these guys. Which side do I take? And it's about something as banal as are they changing the app layout of iOS 19? But yeah, Mark Gurman said this is going to be an exciting year because iOS 19 is getting a redesign, and John Prosser then showed a screenshot of messages and said, "Look, it's hard to change the tool; it's pathetic." And then Mark Gurman, not Gaiman. He I don't know what the phrase is. He clapped back. That's it. He clapped back and said, "Oh, it's much too early. They haven't got the new features yet, so just ignore." But I don't think I want it to change all that much. Like you said, I don't really like visual redesigns unless it's a clear improvement. Then because you will automatically lose some usability in the short term when you change any interface. So you have to have a good reason.
Yeah, a change for the sake of change is never good. So it's there needs to be a practical reason for it.
People don't like change, do they? People don't like change.
No, but and on computers, it is a big deal because it affects your efficiency. It affects how well you do things. There's a learning curve. You get back to your level, but you hit a speed bump, and you have to kind of reacclimate, I guess, yourself to the new UI. It's not going to be super dramatic, but it's enough to make you kind of look twice or pause a bit. So last year's WWDC was, mostly about Apple Intelligence because there was this, I guess, feeling by Apple that they had to jump on the bandwagon and make it seem like they're on the whole AI push thing. But it feels like there's not really a user demand for it. I mean, Apple makes Apple Intelligence a huge marketing point for they use it to push their phones, to push their devices. They're using it to market their devices. But if Apple Intelligence took a backseat to WWDC, do you guys think that would be a problem? Do you think that would be an issue, or would you actually kind of welcome it?
I think that shareholders are looking for news about AI because AI is the buzzword and everyone's doing something, and and it won't just be, it will also be things like Mac Studio and Mac Pro and how that is enabling AI and AI development and stuff, I'm sure. So Apple has to be doing something in AI, but for normal people, and we're not completely normal in the sense that we don't use AI to write stuff. I think normal people are probably using these tools to help them improve what they're writing. I think people are. And I think if you don't have it, you will suddenly feel a little bit like left behind. And I think from our perspective, we would totally be like, oh, it's shocking. We shouldn't be using AI. And it's terrible that AI is coming and taking all our content and rewriting it for Google and stuff. But for the ordinary people out there, I think if you're writing an important email and you get offered help to make sure it sounds better, then you're going to take it, I think. And then you've got the photos, like people are all over the place saying, oh, can you remove this person from my photograph? And there are apps that do that, but it's going to do it for free. You're not going to have to pay for an app anymore. So there are definitely things about this stuff that I think appeal to people who are more sort of on a different level to us when it comes to this stuff.
I think they kind of have to talk about Apple Intelligence. Personally, I wish they wouldn't. I think it's been a really bad year for Apple, and one of the reasons for that is how much Apple Intelligence has dominated everything they've done. It's clearly hindered their efforts in all the other areas because they're so focused on this one thing, and this one thing hasn't even paid off. That's the really depressing thing, is that they've put all their eggs in one basket, or maybe two baskets if you include spatial computing, and neither of them are making them any money or making them look good. They're both, Vision OS or Vision Pro is quite nice, but Apple Intelligence is basically a laughing stock. It's behind all the other AI platforms. It's not very useful at this point because I agree with you, Karen, that for a lot of people, a mature AI platform would be useful in ways that I personally wouldn't care for. I think you're right. But Apple Intelligence isn't a mature AI platform. It's not as good as the equivalents that you can get even on the iPhone. You can just get ChatGPT, or I think Gemini is available, certainly on the iPad. There's no reason why it wouldn't be on the iPhone as well. So you can just access these other things without having to use Apple Intelligence, and Apple Intelligence isn't that good. So I think we've heard enough about Apple Intelligence for a while, but I get that they have to talk about it.
I think the thing is, though, like Apple Intelligence and the features I spoke about and that we're talking about from the consumer perspective is different to the sort of machine learning and the AI stuff going on in the background, and that is associated with this whole Siri fiasco, because there is a lot more to AI than those simple things that normal people can use to improve their writing and sort out their photographs, and and then there are things like AI being used to sort of identify what dog is in your photograph and all of that kind of stuff. So there's obviously a lot going on behind the scenes that does matter. But yeah, I think like whether Apple's having to rely on Chat GPT for part of this, so it's like, do they involve other other tools like that? Do they allow other tools into the fold, and do they try and catch up themselves? I don't know. But these are the kind of questions I guess they're going to answer at WWDC.
The identifying the dogs thing, that was the single most impressive thing about Apple Intelligence when I was testing it for the iPhone 16e review. It was really good at that. But yeah, it's not totally clear when you do it, when you what's it called, visual intelligence. But it gives the impression that it's all going through ChatGPT and Google Search, because it takes a picture and then it sort of says, "Do you want to ask something about this?" And then that's going through ChatGPT, or you can do a image search to find relevant things, and that's just Google Search, I think, or Google Image Search. So I think they are already maybe taking sort of implied credit for things that they're maybe not actually doing in-house. I think it probably would be a good idea to get more help, because they're not doing it very well at the moment, and it's surprising and kind of embarrassing that they haven't done a better job, because they could buy some companies that know how to do it.
While we're talking about Apple Intelligence, we could talk about the new iPad, which doesn't support Apple Intelligence. The 11th generation iPad, it's here. It has a chip, an older chip, that doesn't meet the specification to support Apple Intelligence. And David wrote a recent Apple Breakfast column. You should check out Apple Breakfast on macworld.com.
Thank you, Roman.
And David says, that's okay. It's okay that it doesn't support Apple Intelligence. Dave Wenning on Blue Sky said, I keep wondering if the people behind the industry's rush to AI know anything about lemmings. In this case, Apple's caution is warranted.
I've got a theory. I only came up with this earlier. It's probably a load of nonsense, but you know how like the iPad was always the one for education. Like they've got a lot of schools in America, I think, that use them, and I think some schools here in the UK. Well, what if keeping Apple Intelligence off of an iPad that goes into schools and therefore doesn't allow kids to use it to, generate their essays? Maybe it's a good thing.
That's not a bad idea. I like that. I'm going to get behind that conspiracy theory. Yeah, I like that.
Sounds like.
I'm going to share that on Facebook.
Carrie, didn't you at one time work for Apple PR?
I did, yeah, like 20 years.
So that's a very good. Apple PR should have come up with that. So.
Oh yeah, no, we should do that story. Ex-Apple PR says. No, I agree with. I'm trying to remember David Wenning. I very much agree with David Wenning. The iPhone 16e, which I reviewed, I've already said that. Sorry, was kind of ruined by Apple Intelligence. Like they felt like I had to put Apple Intelligence on the iPhone 16e, which meant that they had to include both 6 gig of RAM, which I think they have also done on the new iPad, but they had to bump the RAM and give it an A18 chip, and that meant it couldn't be a budget phone anymore. It meant that it had to go up from $429 to $600. I'm trying to remember the numbers now, but they no longer have a budget phone in the true sense, because they felt like they had to include Apple Intelligence, and everything became geared towards that, and they were stripping off other things. So it's only got one camera lens and it's not got MagSafe, and they were like, just jettison everything else as long as it has Apple Intelligence. And I think that really ruined it. So then the iPad comes along, and I'm thinking, oh no, they're going to do the same thing again, because Apple Intelligence, like I was saying before, is just this monomania at the moment, that it's influencing everything they do. And they didn't. And I'm really pleased about that, because number one, it would have been terrible if they put up the price and stripped off other things as well. But number two, people with iPads don't need a fast processor. Like it would, like at least with the 16e, you can sort of go, well, it kind of could have had a cheaper processor, but it's an iPhone and I use it all the time. Probably going to use it for quite a few years. I'll want to use more advanced apps in a year and 2 years from now. But the iPad, you don't need ever for it to be fast. Like 90% of people that buy iPads in general, I would say, and certainly like almost 100% of people that buy the basic iPad, they're just going to read their email on it. They're going to look on the Screwfix website. That's what my father-in-law does all day. They sit on the sofa and they go look at Netflix. You don't need an A18 chip for that. It would be insane to include an A18 chip and push up the price and all the rest of it. So, yeah, I'm very relieved that they didn't do that. I'm sort of surprised they didn't do it because it seemed like that's what they would do, but they didn't, and I'm pleased.
I don't know. I mean, the thing about iPads also, though, is that people don't update them very often. So if you have an iPad, you probably have it for 5 years. So by the time people are replacing their iPad 11, it'll be quite sort of long in the tooth. Is that the same?
It is, yeah. But yeah, I guess Apple must have had to think about that. They go, maybe we don't want everybody to be on Apple Intelligence yet, although they kind of do. But this is going to be, yeah, as you said, 2030. People in 2030 are going to have iPads that can't run Apple Intelligence, and they can. That doesn't look very good to shareholders.
But like you said, I think in your piece, they needed to keep the price down. So, if you make it too good, if you make the iPad too good, then why would anyone buy the iPad Air, for example? If you want that size iPad, then and you want it at a particular price, it's got to be worse than the iPad Air. So there's got to be something much worse about it. But then you've got like that weird thing about the iPad mini, and I was like thinking about this earlier, like who's the iPad mini for? This does support Apple Intelligence. So who needs an iPad mini with Apple Intelligence? Who doesn't need an iPad with Apple Intelligence? It's like, I kind of feel a bit like what Apple should have done is made an iPad that was in the mini size and exactly the same. So you've got you've got an iPad, you don't have the iPad mini in the way you have it right now. You have like an iPad that's 11 inches and an iPad that's 9 inches. And the iPad that's 9 inches is the iPad mini, and they're both the same spec, just like the iPad Air and the iPad Pro have their sort of sister product. That makes more sense to me. So I just don't quite get the iPad mini and how it fits in.
Yeah, the iPad mini is kind of an odd duck. I never see people using an iPad mini, even kids. It's always, the regular sized iPad or an iPad Air. I've even seen iPad Pros like in coffee shops being used by people doing work. I've never really seen an iPad mini. And you're right, it's a more powerful device than the iPad. It'd be interesting to know who's buying that particular machine. Apple will never tell us, but
I did wonder if
yeah.
that was it. Like you're saying in coffee shops and stuff like that, if people are using it in sort of in those kind of environments, and it's that handheld device that they go and they put in they're going around the warehouse or they're logging things, and if it's that
right, they're used in like production environments and stuff because it's small enough, but they need a little more power. So yeah, maybe like that. I wonder if people actually use like an iPad mini as like a phone, even, because people who really want a super big phone.
It is a nice iPad because I had the most recent iPad mini, and I ended up writing a weird article about it, basically saying that it has all these problems, but it's still really nice. I can't think of a single person for whom it's the best iPad, but it's still a really nice iPad. And like, it is really portable, and I don't get why. So you were talking about reorganizing the range, Karen. I'm gonna do my hobby horse again of saying what they should do is just strip it down. iPad Air, iPad Pro. iPad Air is available in medium and small. iPad Pro is available in medium and large. And that's it. And then everybody just goes, do you want it powerful or not powerful? Do you want it big or small? And that's it. And that will make it so much easier. The iPad mini should be branded as an Air because it's the lightest iPad. They want it to be weird. They want it to be confusing.
The model you're talking about, David, is essentially the MacBook model. They have the 2 MacBook Pros and the 2 MacBook Airs. So, it's essentially that. But speaking of making product lines more complicated or simplified.
Your segues today are so good, Roman.
I actually don't think that's a very good segue. So supposedly we're getting a new iPhone 17 Air this fall. Apple hasn't actually, announced this phone or anything. Everyone's dubbing it the 17 Air because it's supposed to be super thin. And since it's super thin, it may not have any ports at all. David, once again in Apple Breakfast, you should read it on macworld.com. He says that having a portless iPhone is a very good idea. Of course, some people don't agree. Cliff Chapman on Blue Sky posted, USB ports for recharging are still far more prevalent than wireless charging points. Also, what about the mountains of otherwise fine USB battery packs that are essential because they never put big enough batteries in them? I don't know if they don't put in big enough batteries in them. But anyways, Mark Cordiero on Blue Sky said, the biggest obstacle for me would be CarPlay. Not everyone is going to be buying brand new cars with wireless CarPlay, and I often find rental cars still require the wire for CarPlay. Apple could make a dongle, but it's just another thing to buy and remember. When I travel, I usually cable charge. I could live with a portless iPhone. I rarely use the ports anymore, except to like charge because I feel like I should charge through the port to use it because it's there.
I don't wireless charge my phone because my experience way back was it was rubbish, so I just gave up on it, and I should try again. But is it not the case that if you want to really quickly charge your phone, then you want to plug it into the USB-C? So
Yes.
that's the thing. As far as I'm concerned, if I need to bump up the charge of my phone because it's down to like 29%, which happens a lot, then I'll plug it in to USB-C for like 10 minutes just to give it a bit of extra juice. It's like the idea of it being wireless is so wrong because it's not wireless anyway, is it? It's like you've actually got a more heavy, more awkward dongle or whatever you call it to plug in, because you either plug in to a little port on the bottom of your phone, or you snap on some big circle on the back of your phone. I mean, how is that any different?
It's actually easier action because you just put it vaguely near, and because the power of the magnet that it goes, and then it's just a bit easier when you lean over. Because I used to use, I've obviously transcended wired charging now, but instead of like slightly fiddly sort of getting the end of the cable, you just go clunk and it's on. Not with the iPhone 16e, of course, which I'm very unhappy about.
I can see the benefit in as much as like if you've got a port, then water can get in, so it's not as wireless, it's waterproof. If you've got a port, then you can break your cable in the middle of it. There are all sorts of problems with ports that I can see the benefit in getting rid of, and I can see that it could make the phone slimmer if they wanted the phone to be slimmer, which maybe they don't because it might be Bendigate all over again. And also, like, alternatively, they put bigger batteries in because they've got the room to. But I'm sort of thinking to the future, and I'm thinking, going back to it's not really wireless charging. What if it really was wireless charging? Because there were things going on with this, weren't there? Where you could, I think it was like Motorola or something, had this thing where if the phone was within 10 feet, that it could pick up a charge. And obviously this technology is not there yet, but I don't think this is going to transcend plugging it in via your USB-C until that kind of technology takes off, because I just don't think that this sort of idea of clipping it onto a charger that's wireless is only like a halfway house. And I also think they need to sort of look at not being so reliant on batteries, because batteries are bad, aren't they? They're bad for the environment. Lithium's not good. So if we can get to a point where our phones just charge over the airways, and you're not as reliant on batteries and things like that, that's where we could be, maybe in 50 years' time.
But yeah, so that's all good points. I agree with almost all of that, except hopefully not the 50 years part, because the point I was trying to make, right, was that, and I should first of all say, it's not the iPhone 17 Air this year, if it's called that, it will not be portless. The theory is that they wanted to make the iPhone 17 Air portless, but they kind of chickened out because they thought maybe EU regulators wouldn't like it, or maybe there were practicalities physically. So they're not going to do it, but they're going to see how keen people are on a really slim iPhone. And if it sells really well, then they're going to go ahead with all the things that they had planned for it, which includes being portless and maybe being foldable. So it isn't going to happen this year. So it would be the earliest we can expect this to happen. It would be an iPhone 18 Air 2026. And then the key thing for me is that there would still be phones on sale which still had ports. So the other three, in that first generation, you'd probably have one portless, three with ports, and there'd still be an iPhone 17e that had come out that spring. So there would be all sorts of phones that were even brand new that had ports, not to mention all the phones people would still have. So it would just be like early adopters, but it would gradually filter down, right? And that's how I see it as being a positive, is that you'd have this slim range of early adopters going, look at our lovely phone, it has no port, here are the benefits. And then society would react to that. And then technology would develop and they would start accelerating their research into longer range wireless charging, and wireless chargers would become more widespread in society. You'd go around somebody's house and instead of it being, can I borrow a USB-C cable, it would be, oh, I see there's a puck there. Do you mind if I just put it on? Yes, you can. And CarPlay would become more like, more cars would feel like they had to include a wireless CarPlay option, and everything else would catch up. Like that's how technology usually works, is that somebody just does something annoying and then everybody has to react to that. And I feel like that would be kind of a positive. But
the other thing though is just look at all those cars that have still got the 15, 30 point adapters. I mean, my car is really old, but like, you know, it's people don't change their cars very frequently, so a lot of people are driving around with cars that have very old technology in them. And yeah, it's great if you can buy the latest car and get a wireless iPad, iPhone thing and CarPlay and all of that, but most people aren't going to have that. And it's going to be a long time before it does trickle down. Plus, they're going to probably end up putting the wrong thing in most of these cars, which it's like all those plugs you see. You know, you can get plug sockets with a USB-A port on them. And hotels have like gone out and put all of these USB-A plugs in. Nobody uses USB-A. The technology never catches up in time when it goes out into the market like that, you know. And I just think, which technology do they need to be putting in cars and everywhere else?
2 words, Karen. Dongle solves everything. It's the solution to and cause of all of life's problems.
I think one thing we could count on is Apple's not going to like convert their whole iPhone lineup to portless anytime soon. The infrastructure is just too overwhelmingly based on wired technology and wireless. It does seem odd to me that a MagSafe is considered wireless because you're still putting a connector on it that's actually wired. You know, it's a wired connector that's plugged into an outlet, and then, as David puts it, it clunks onto your phone. And we call that wireless technology, yet it's not really wireless. I would like to see Apple put out a phone that's portless, because like as David said, then that pushes everything and it pushes the innovation and the progress.
I guess it's like electric cars, isn't it? That initially you couldn't really do anything with electric cars because the charging points were so spaced out. It wasn't practical to drive anywhere. But then the fact that rich people had electric cars, then suddenly everybody wants to accommodate the rich people. And, you know, I feel like now I'm finding myself on the side of the rich people, but I feel like if there were rich people with portless iPhones, then hotels would be falling over themselves to accommodate them. And the CarPlay thing, to be honest, has slightly thrown me. Like, so I got so many comments for this article, a lot of them in Swedish because my article got translated, and I still get the emails. Angry Swedish people. The two things that really made me pause were CarPlay, because I'm unusually in this case. My father-in-law bought us a car, and it has super fancy CarPlay. But yeah, that is really difficult, and I don't know how. I don't know if the infrastructure could catch up. The other thing is audio quality, and people, because the example I had used was when they got rid of the headphone port, because I was like, that was all right, wasn't it, when they got rid of the headphone port? Because now we have wireless headphones, more, you know, a bit cheaper and a bit more widely available. But the point that the commenters were making was that yes, we have wireless headphones, but they're still not as good quality, and that actually hasn't caught up. So yeah, I don't know.
I was thinking, you know, talking about this idea of the portless iPhone, it's going to be more expensive, isn't it? There's got to be more to it, because it's not just going to be sold on the fact that it's portless, it'll be everything else. It's just that the lack of ports makes these things possible. But like, why would you buy a phone that has less features? Like, something so fundamental. I'd just be too nervous about it. I'd be thinking, well, what if I go around someone's house and I need to charge my phone and they haven't got anything I can charge it on?
You need richer friends.
But yeah, it's I don't know, and that just struck me as like, why would I pay more for a phone that had less if it was all about the ports? But obviously there'll be more to it than that if they did that. But
it will be a question of marketing, and Apple will have to educate us on the benefits. And if they can't make a good case for it, then it'll just flop. But I feel like it would be an interesting experiment, if nothing else. It'll be like the home button. Like the home button stuck around for 10 years after they started to get rid of it. So we'll still have ports for a long time, and it will be a continuous experiment to see, is this working? Are we developing technology to accommodate the loss of the port? And if we're not, I guess it won't succeed. I think it's worth a try.
Well, that does it for this episode of the Macworld Podcast, episode 928. Thanks to Karen Haslam. Thanks to David Price. And thanks to you, the audience. Thank you for tuning in. You can subscribe to the Macworld Podcast in the podcast app, on Spotify, on YouTube at the Macworld Podcast channel, or through any other podcast app. Do you have any comments or questions? Send us an email at podcast@macworld.com, or contact us through Blue Sky, Facebook, or Threads. Just search for Macworld and look for the blue mouse logo. Join us in the next episode of the Macworld Podcast as we talk about the latest in the world of Apple. See you next time.